So welcome everybody, welcome. This is Reevaluating Worth, how the Venus retrograde in summer 23 will show up in life and in psychedelic-assisted healing sessions. Okay, so we just did a roll call. We've got folks coming in from all over the world, really. A lot over the US and as far as Australia. I'm on the East Coast of the United States. And we're going to dive in here. So reevaluating worth, it's kind of really, the title basically sums it up, but we'll get into the details in this talk, in this about half-hour talk before we get into question and answers about the details of Venus retrograde in general, and then particularly for this year. Reevaluating worth, though, is kind of like the core of it. Is that we want to reevaluate, we want to take this time to reevaluate. It is the time to actually not move forward in certain areas of life. It's a time to reevaluate. And if we move in line with that, then we're in a good place, because that's what the universe, life is asking of us. Okay, so let's, before we get into the information, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be leading the Paradigm Shift Integration Circle this summer. And that's a 7-week online adventure in which we get together with a small group of psychonauts to really explore in depth everything that we talk about today. So it's basically, we're going to navigate, it pretty much overlaps with the Venus retrograde. So we're going to navigate the Venus retrograde together and see specifically how the choreography, the movement of the celestial bodies and of our own life are choreographed. It comes with a full 2-hour one-on-one personal reading, so that gives you quite a bit of depth of kind of insight into your life and into your psyche. We got 7 group calls in which we track our transits. Transits is the movements of the planets through our chart. They reflect the situations and the themes that are up for us at any certain period of time. Such as the Venus retrograde. So we're going to be tracking that. We're going to look at optimal timings for psychedelic-assisted healing sessions, and generally just be together to marvel at the choreography of life in the universe with a supportive group of individuals who are psychonauts. We're into kind of plunging the inner space, examining the outer space, mapping the inner space, understanding ourselves, understanding life, and just marveling at the meeting point between the inner space and the outer world. It also comes with a bonus lifetime access to my fundamentals course. That's for those who want to actually be able to sight read charts using archetypal astrology. So you see a chart and you can read it. That's just a bonus. Not everybody, that's not required for this integration circle at all. But if you do want to go deeper and actually practice archetypal astrology, you'll have access to that. Okay, so just starting off, if there's anybody who's kind of new to astrology out there. So why do we look at the stars? We look at the stars, particularly in archetypal astrology and a lot of branches of astrology, not because the stars exert some influence over us, not because they exert some force over us. There are some schools of astrology that say that, you know, the stars exert a force, a light, some type of external force that affects our lives. It's not that way. It's, you know, we don't practice archetypal astrology for that reason, and a lot of forms of astrology. We look at the stars because the outer space reflects the inner space. So the terrain of the space of outside of us reflects the terrain of our inner experience of life, and also the events that are happening on the stage of our life here in the world. There's actually no boundary between the two. They're actually two sides of one coin. That's one of the, that's kind of like the end point of this practice, is realizing that there is no, you know, we get the universe gives us kind of like a cheat sheet. It gives us a cheat sheet. It gives us a map to our psyche by looking at the outer space, this movement of celestial bodies. We have a map to our psyche, to our life, and that's given with us, it appears to me, out of love. The universe gives it to us. It's so supportive to have that map of our psyche and our lives. And ultimately, the kind of secret written on the back of that map is that there's no division. You know, there really isn't a division. You know, it's kind of a materialist reductionist perception, say like my life happens within my body, within my chemistry, and everything outside is random. But actually, our life is the story of our life. It's all the events, all the people we meet, all the situations. It's the story, it's the stage. That's our lives, as are the grandeur of the heavens. That's also us. So we look at the stars to appreciate that and also to get guidance. And an astrological archetype is what we talk about when we talk about the planets and the symbolism of the planets. So what is an archetype? What is an astrological archetype? It's a symbolism associated with a planet that has kind of a breadth to it. It has a breadth to it. So it has a real full-bodied spectrum of meaning, all the way from a challenging side to a rewarding side. And any manifestation of any phenomenon along that whole spectrum still is symbolically resonant with the core archetype of that planet. So like Venus as an example, we'll really dig into what the symbolism of Venus is, and just as a preliminary thing, it's like, it has to do with pleasure, has to do with that which is sweet, that which is pleasurable, harmonious. So generally speaking, that's a positive, that's a welcome archetype. But there can be a challenging side to it, like say you eat too many sweets or something, that can have a challenge to it. It can be, you can get sick. You have something that's too sweet. Or if there's a kind of Venus associated with the pleasure that we receive when we partake in something beautiful. So like beauty could be actually very superficial. Beauty could be something that is superficial, that is just at the surface. And that's more on the challenging side, because it doesn't actually have a core of meaning that feels actually satisfying. It feels like a very thin veneer of pleasure. Whereas, like a beautiful act, an act of kindness or an act of love, a beautiful act, that's also beautiful. So these examples are resonant with beauty, with the symbolism of beauty, but one's a little bit more meaningful, and the other one's a little bit more kind of misleading, I guess you could say. So an astrological archetype has a spectrum of meaning. And let's have a look at the particular archetype of Venus. So just like we said, so in our overarching way, we could say that Venus, the archetype of Venus, basically is harmony. That's a good kind of one word encapsulation of Venus, in my opinion. So harmony, when things are harmonious, they give pleasure. They give us pleasure. Like if we, say you look at somebody and they have some type of harmony of their features or something like that, it makes them attractive, makes them beautiful, it gives us pleasure to behold. You look at a painting or like a photograph or something, and there's some composition, harmony of composition there, harmony of color there. And that can give us, again, a sense of pleasure. And you can kind of like strum a common chord with a friend, and you feel a sense of harmony and friendship there. That's also pleasurable. You're in love. You have a bond of love with somebody. That's deeply pleasurable. So Venus is associated with pleasure. Venus is associated with harmony. Three-part harmony. Somebody's singing. Some people are singing three-part harmony. Attracts the ear because it's pleasurable. So Venus also associated with the law of attraction, that which attracts us, the principle of attraction. And then equally, there's also with Venus a kind of a core association with value, that which we value, and a sense of value and worth, because what we value, what gives us pleasure, we tend to value. So there's the deep association there with worth and value, and that's important to keep in mind when looking at the retrograde, because that's really the core that the retrograde tries to shake up a bit to kind of get the crust off and really get back to the soft core of what our true values are. Okay, so let's look at what a retrograde is. So again, this is, if folks are new to astrology, that's what this is about. This is just a way of understanding retrograde. What is a retrograde? A retrograde is when a planet moves backwards. Does a planet actually move backwards in the sky? No, a planet does not really move backwards in the sky from a heliocentric view. So here you've got a heliocentric view over on this side. That is as if you were looking at the solar system from the top down, and the sun is in the center. If you're looking from the top down, the sun is in the center. No planets ever move backwards. They all move forwards. They all move in the same direction, and they never change direction. So if you change it to a geocentric view, though, which is the view from Earth, so that's what they pictured here. Earth is the little kind of X marks the spot. And here in the heliocentric view, you can see the X marks the spot is just another planet among all the planets orbiting the sun. Whereas over here in the geocentric view, X marks the spot is the center of the solar system, the central viewing point of our experience of the solar system. And so from our viewpoint, planets appear to move backwards, because if you picture the planets and their movement like a racetrack, and they're all racing around the sun at different speeds, if you're in a car and you're racing another car and you begin to beat it, you begin to go faster than it, it will appear as if that car is moving backwards. It's not actually moving backwards, but because you're going faster than it, it appears like a visual illusion. It appears like it's moving backwards. So from the geocentric point of view on Earth, we're one of those cars in the race. And so occasionally we beat around the bend some of the other planets and they start to appear they're moving backwards. So if they're not actually moving backwards, why is it so important to us? It's important to us because from the geocentric view, we are at the center of the universe. You are the center because you are the observer. You're the observer that's looking out and experiencing life in the universe. So you're the center. And from your perspective, from our perspective here on Earth, the planet is moving backwards. And so symbolically, it is relevant. It does appear to ask us to backpedal and review. So that's a retrograde. So what does a retrograde mean? It means reassess for rebalancing. It's basically like the universe asking us to reassess. It's as if the universe has checks and balances built into it, and it's asking us to, it's a time for a particular kind of check and balance in that particular archetypal sphere of symbolism. So it's asking us to reassess, rebalance, reconsider. An interesting thing about reconsider is if you look at the Latin roots of that word, re is again, cone, with, and sitter, stars. So again with the stars, reconsider, again with the stars. That's a way that I like to think about it. To remind myself that when something's in retrograde, it's asking us to reconsider. It's asking us to again be with the stars, the celestial bodies, and see what they're asking of us. Okay. So what then does a Venus retrograde mean? So we're asked to reassess and adjust the areas of our life that are Venusian. So that's friendship, it's love, relationships, art, beauty, sensuality, and particularly value. So that's going to be both in our personal lives and for us collectively as a state, as a country, as a planet. It asks us to reassess on those levels, and it's real. It really does kind of in broad, obvious strokes ask us to reassess. You'll see as we get further, it inflects differently into our unique birth charts. So it's going to inflect differently, specifically what it's going to ask of us. But as a general trend or as a general rule, friendship, is there something that's unspoken in a friendship or in your friendships? Is there an old friendship that's wanting to get reunited, reconsidered? Love, is there something there in love that hasn't really been worked through? And it's like we've treaded too far. Now we need to backtrack, work that out, untangle ourselves from that so that we can move forward. Art, is there some old art project or some old art skill that maybe you've left and it's neglected and it's time to go back and rekindle it? Beauty, your own kind of routines around your own attractiveness, something like that, reconsidering, or even beauty, what you consider to be beautiful. Sensuality, have you is there something there that you need to return to tune up? And very particularly value or value system. It really asks a lot of our value system. Okay, so let's get into the specifics here of the retrograde cycle for this year. So the Venus retrograde period is technically from July 23rd to September 4th. So that's when the actual that's when Venus will actually be moving backwards. That's when the actual retrograde is happening. Venus will be moving backwards. And as Venus is moving backwards between the 23rd of July and September 4th, that's when we feel, okay, we're backtracking, we're backpedaling, we're reconsidering. If you look down in the middle here, it says Venus retrograde shadow orb. So that's actually very important. So what is the Venus retrograde shadow orb? If you're practicing astrology, this will be familiar to you, but if you're not, it might be news to you. So Venus retrograde shadow orb is really nice thing to know, kind of it's like, I want to say a hack, but it's not a hack. It's something much more important than a hack. That would be belittling it, but it's something, it's a nice kind of little bonus of information for us. The Venus retrograde shadow orb has to do with, when you look at the bottom here, it says Venus retrograde degrees. So this year, this time in the summer, the retrograde is going to be between 12 degrees of Leo and 28 degrees of Leo. So what does the shadow orb mean? The shadow orb means Venus is cruising through the zodiac just like usual, and it gets into Leo, and then it starts, it's moving forward just like usual, and it crosses the 12-degree mark. So it's still moving forward. It hasn't retrograded yet, but it's crossed the 12-degree mark. So it has entered into the shadow orb. It will continue to move forward. It'll get all the way up to 28 degrees by July 23rd. And then it will stop. It will be stopped, and it will move backwards. It will move backwards through the Venus retrograde period from July 23rd until September 4th. And by September 4th, it will again be back at 12 degrees of Leo. So it will have turned around and walk backwards to 12 degrees of Leo. And then again, it will move forward. And by the time it moves forward and gets past 28 degrees of Leo, it will be out of the Venus retrograde shadow orb by October 4th. So that whole cycle will have worked its mojo on us. It'll have massaged its meaning into us. It'll have done its cycle of kind of really asking what it has to ask of us. So by October 4th, it'll kind of be wrapped up. So it's nice to know the Venus retrograde shadow orb. It's nice to know for the end of it, because then we know October 4th that will kind of have a bow on it, and we'll move on. Even more important is to know the beginning of the Venus retrograde shadow orb, which is June 19th, because what you can do then is you can look at what you were doing on June 19th, thereabouts. You can look at what you were doing, what themes were up for you, particularly in the Venusian realms that we mentioned earlier. What themes were up for you? What had charge for you? What were you encountering? And that it gives you insight into what this Venus retrograde will be about. When you enter into the Venus retrograde shadow orb June 19th, whatever's up at that time, it gives you a hint of what you will be kind of wrestling with and working with over this Venus retrograde. Because once it goes up to 28 degrees of Leo and starts coming back, you'll realize, oh, I'm back. I'm working on the stuff that had come up since June 19th. And when you get back to 12 degrees of Leo, the degree that it was at on June 19th, you realize you're in the same place, but you're in a different place. The same charge is up, the same themes are up, but it's adjusted now. And now you can start to move forward. Okay. So let us look at let's look at Venus retrograde for the collective. So it's very obvious in our lives personally. It's actually also obvious in our lives in the collective. If you look for it, you can see it. That collectively, when Venus retrogrades, we have a collective reconsidering of our values. You can go back like summer of 2020. That was a Venus retrograde that summer. And what happened there, one of the things that happened there was actually the death of George Floyd. And, the Black Lives Matter movement had started before that. You know, the Black Lives Matter had started, it was already active before summer of 2020. But actually what had happened is it was not a kind of a central debating point in the United States. It had kind of fallen a bit into the backdrop. And then the summer of 2020 happens. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. George Floyd loses his life. And then suddenly it surges back up, and it becomes a real collective value search. It kind of like this soul searching value moment in history of really trying to assess like what matters as a culture, at least in the United States, but I'm sure it was happening all over the world. You know, we came up with signs like this. A lot of signs like this came up that you can see here on the slide. You know, science is real, Black Lives Matter, no human is illegal. It's kind of like a decree of a value system. And there was a bunch of things I remember like this that were coming up. People would put a bunch of different kind of value meters together into these kind of slogan packages. And you know, there was a lot there about the pandemic as well. And so it can grip us. It can grip us individually. It can grip us as a collective. In the holidays of 2021, we went through Venus retrograde right around, you know, right around the New Year's and the holidays. And there was this spike in cases that was like the Omicron wave. And I remember for me, what I noticed was that there was a lot of talk about values of the holidays, family values. There was this thing about like travel was disrupted. Some people still risk traveling. Some people didn't travel. A lot of Christmases were spent over Zoom. They're like Zoom Christmases. So like what really matters, you know, is it the presence of the people? Is it that presence like of the presents of the packages? Presence. You know, like what really matters. So that's some of the stuff that goes on in the collective. That's that readjusting, rebalancing, checks and balances. Okay, so Venus retrograde for you personally. What house will Venus transit through? So your birth chart, you know, if you look at your birth chart, you can see where Leo is. Basically, you can see where Leo is. You can see which house it's in, and the different houses, which is different quadrants of the chart, not really quadrants, but different sections of the chart, have different kind of symbolic meaning in our life in terms of areas of our life. And so when you see which house Venus retrogrades through, it's going to be relevant to that house. You know, if it's in the 4th house, oftentimes about your actual house, like the home that you live in. It's in your 7th house. It's a lot about relationship. Venus is going to be a lot about relationship anyways in general, but if it's in the 7th house, it's particularly about relationship. 1st house might be about, you know, your presentation of yourself, your style, your attractiveness, you know, how you present your values. 10th house having to do with your career, maybe friends and your job, your values and your work, and so on and so forth. So which house will Venus be transiting through? And then what alignments will Venus make to your natal planets? Very important. Very important. What alignments will Venus make to your natal planets? In your birth charts, the planets, they have when you were born, the planets were in some position in the sky. They all were in some degree in the zodiac. And when Venus goes through Leo, and it is it going to align with any of those planets? Is it going to be 90 degrees? Is it going to oppose them at 60 degrees? Is it going to be conjoined with them? Is it going to oppose them? Sorry, 180 degrees. Is it going to conjoin with them? So that will color the picture for you. That will kind of bring up what this Venus retrograde is about for you, because the planet that it is aligned with is also going to have its symbolism. And that's going to reveal itself, you know, Venus transiting. So like Venus transiting the sun, you know, Venus transiting the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Maybe I'll just touch on a couple of those. So like Venus transiting moon, that is going to be, you know, there's the moon has to do with the family, with the home, with the intimate relationships. And Venus is really kind of, it also has to do with nourishment and nurturing. And Venus has to do with like sweet things, kind of love, you know, we talked about. So there can be themes up with like friends, emotional intimates, and the actual relationships and the love that's shared in family members, maybe the home, attractiveness in the home. Again, kind of like the fourth house. And so as you see it move over that point, you can see it moves forward. We start to consider some, you know, something starts to come up, it moves back. We start really reconsidering that thing. It stops. And then by the time it does its third pass, we've kind of dialed it in. We're hopefully getting the message the universe is asking of us. Venus, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Venus, Uranus, Venus, Neptune, Venus, Pluto. It's a rich kind of canvas of meaning there. And that's basically the paradigm shift integration circle. That's going to help us with that, because that, you know, to really dive into that, it's good to have some time with a good community and with, you know, the language of astrology, so that you can really kind of see it happening, understand it, kind of get the telegram the universe is sending to you a little earlier, receive it a little earlier, not be as in the dark with it. In fact, I'm going to put that in the chat here. Let me just do this. And if you're watching the recording, there'll be a link there too. So here's the chat for the paradigm shift integration circle, the link. If you're watching the recording, just look below and you'll find it. I'm going to go back a slide here, if it lets me. Let's go this way. So yeah, so just a word about how it's going to show up for you personally. This is everybody does it different, but this is the way that I do it. You know, I look at the houses, and particularly look at the aspects. If in a more traditional astrological way, what you do is you look at also the houses where the signs are that are associated with Venus. But to me, that's too many abstractions removed. That's just my sidebar. It's too many abstractions removed to get like some real meaning. When you know, if you just look at the house it's going through and you look at the aspects, it's going to give you very meaty messages, and there's no need for abstraction there. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay, so Venus retrograde and psychedelic-assisted healing sessions. Venus retrograde and psychedelic-assisted healing sessions. So in psychedelic-assisted healing sessions, the Venus retrograde tends to be fairly obvious, and it tends to show up, it tends to kind of shoulder itself through the crowd of the various themes and thoughts, and present itself to us as that which really needs to be reconsidered, you know. And it's just, it's not like we sit down with the intention and a journal or something like that in the psychedelic assisted healing experience, like what needs to be readjusted, let me ponder on it. We don't need to do that. It will just present itself. It'll just present itself, and we'll know, you know, it will make itself known, what needs to be adjusted. And then also it depends on where in the cycle we are when we engage in this psychedelic assisted healing sessions. You know, if you're at the beginning of the retrograde cycle, oftentimes it could be that the material that comes up is not like conclusive. It's just what is coming up is showing us something needs to be addressed that maybe we're a little blind to, because we're just at the beginning of the retrograde cycle. You know, if we do it during the shadow or before it even starts to move backwards, theme just might come up, and just kind of sit and be a point of consideration. As it starts to move backwards in the beginning of the cycle, then it just presents that something needs to be done, something needs to be adjusted in these Venusian realms. If we engage in the psychedelic-assisted healing session, when we are towards the end of the retrograde, or in that, you know, it's already stopped and started moving forward again, then we might get the download that feels somewhat conclusive. It feels like, okay, this is more certain, like this is the way forward, this is the path forward, this is actually what needed to be adjusted, that was how to adjust it, and now that it is adjusted, we can move forward. So I'm looking forward to getting into questions about this. We're just getting to the end here, winding down. So some of the ways to make the best of the Venus retrograde cycle is really, you know, very much in line with mindfulness meditation and the practice of psychedelic-assisted healing, which is really surrender. We don't have to work too hard. We don't have to work too hard for this stuff. We want to receive it. We want to receive what is being asked of us. And it's a practice of opening up our ears, opening up our pores, opening up our senses, opening up our archetypal eye. That's what we're going to be doing in the paradigm shift integration circles. We're going to be connecting with our ability to perceive the archetypal building blocks of perception and reality and life. And so that we can kind of see, experience them shifting and speaking to us and what they're asking of us. And we want to be in a posture of surrender to do that, a posture of a receptive posture. Mindfulness means that as soon as something comes up, we don't just try and change it immediately. We just really are noting. We're kind of noting what is coming up, and we're seeing the trail of breadcrumbs of where it's leading us. In order to do that, we have to have faith. We have to have faith that the universe is intelligent. Our own inner healing intelligence is intelligent. You know, when we engage in psychedelic-assisted healing and the inner healing intelligence is catalyzed, it knows, it's wise, and it's within us, and it's also in the universe, reflected in the way that the landscape of the heavens reflects our inner terrain. So the cosmic healing intelligence, inner healing intelligence, two sides of the same coin, race, divinity, whatever you want to call it. We want to have faith. We want to have faith. You know, that's really what it's asking of us, because it will take care of us. And then we get to the fourth point. You know, we really can celebrate when we get to the point of marvel, because marvel is like, we just appreciation. We get to see how this great orchestration, choreography is happening around us, and we get to take part in it. This dance that is just the greatest artistic creation. You know, it's called life, it's called the universe, it's called our central part in that play. And so we get to marvel at that, and that is actually truly exhilarating. I think we'll do one more visit of the paradigm shift integration circle, one more invitation. You're welcome to join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be the ability to marvel, the ability to see, spot the choreography, have our faith bolstered, and marvel together, and get a lot of very practical guidance for our life, our life as a whole, our kind of quest to understand our nature, be our nature, and then also our ability to marvel, to be guided, and to address specifically what's going on for us this summer. So I'm going to begin to transition now into a question and answer, though. One more thing, though, before I do, I just want to do one more thing before I transition in the question and answer, and that is show you another kind of very interesting little something that's going on this summer that is related. It's very much related to the Venus retrograde. Okay, so what I am putting in the chat right now, and I'll include it in the recording as well. What I'm putting in the chat is actually another webinar. It's happening tomorrow night. Free webinar for y'all. And we're going to be looking at this. Let's let's show you something here. So this is a transit chart. This is basically just a picture of the planets as they are right now, or as they were at 7:52 p.m. on the East Coast in the United States this evening. So we can see, when we look at this chart, we can see Venus here is in Leo. Surprise, surprise. We've been talking about the Venus retrograde in Leo. We can see it's at 19 degrees. So it's well within the shadow orb. It's moving towards that July 23rd retrograde. And it's actually in what's called a tense alignment, a 90-degree square. You can see a red line there to Uranus. And so what we have this year and some of next year that's fairly unique and noteworthy is we have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the sky. And a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the sky is so rich that we're going to be exploring it in a whole nother webinar, a whole nother talk tomorrow night. That talk is called Awakenings, Windfalls, and Inflations. The great Jupiter-Uranus conjunction of 2023 and 2024. So it's a special one. It's a very special one, particularly if you're talking about psychedelic-assisted healing. It can be kind of reflective of big openings, big releases, wonderful, glorious windfall releases, and other stuff too, that we'll be getting into tomorrow night. That being said, I just wanted to note it here because Venus, the whole Venus retrograde cycle is going to be over this Jupiter-Uranus. It's going to be just kind of in alignment with it, in tension with it, going back, forth through the retrograde. And so there's something there about, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is oftentimes called the big leap, or the big leap for freedom. So Uranus is the archetype of freedom, release. Jupiter is the archetype of expansion, success. That's like that's Jupiter, right? The biggest planet. The big leap of freedom, that's Uranus, kind of like the rebellious leap for freedom. Or it's called the successful, that's Jupiter, big, large, successful, abundant release. Uranus associated with release, freedom, emancipation, release. So the big release, the big freedom, you'll notice in the talk tomorrow night, it's awakenings, windfalls, and inflation. So there's an inflationary aspect there to be mindful of that we'll talk about tomorrow night. But I just want to point that out because it adds another layer of texture to this Venus retrograde. It's going to be cruising in tension with that Jupiter-Uranus all the way through October, through the entire Venus retrograde shadow orb. Very interesting. It's almost worth having a webinar at the end of it just to go back and talk about it because it's so fascinating. And if you join the Paradigm Shift Integration Circle, we'll be talking about it in real time as it's happening. So come and join us. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can entertain some questions now. So you're free to, you can type it in the box. You can turn off or you can open up your mic, whatever you like to do. Actually, why don't we do hands? Because maybe that'll avoid a little bit of chaos. Let's do hands. I know somebody's got questions. Psychedelic-assisted healing, Venus retrograde. These are fruitful topics. All right, Mike, you're on deck.
There you go. Yeah. Question about the psychedelic ceremonies. When would be the best date to hold ceremonies during the retrograde? Is there a particular time slot? I mean, you were showing that. I mean,
yeah. I would approach it. I mean, you would want to look at your personal transits. You want to look at your personal transits if you can, because that'll give you more information pertinent to you. But barring that, because we won't be able to do that here, we could say that looking at the Venus retrograde orb, we're well into the first part of the shadow orb. So whatever is up is already up. It's already charged. So if we journey now between now and June 23rd, we'll just feel that. We'll feel like something needs to shift, right? Particularly in everything that we talked about, Venusian, love, friendship, art, beauty, finances, things of value. Money has value too, right? So like money. After July 23rd, when it's retrograding, we will start to have a little bit more of a, at that time, we're actively reconsidering. We may be actively letting go of things that we had presumed would be steady. We're actively, in that way. And then when it gets back, it's September 4th, it goes all the way back. There'll be like a feeling of like, oh, if we journey then, it's a little bit more like about the path ahead. It's a little bit more about like what is possible now that we've done that adjustment. Another thing to note is that depending on where you journey in the cycle, it will probably be reflected in actually the character of the journey, not even like the material that's coming up, but the actual character of the journey, the logistical character of the journey. So like if Venus is already retrograding backwards, you might find out that the journey experience is like going back to a Venusian thing. Like maybe it's with a friend, an old friend that you hadn't been, like, or maybe you had, but it's like an old friend comes back around, or maybe there's some old kind of beautiful setting or artistic piece that comes up, like for the altar or something, that just pops out from storage, and it's like old and it's like there to be revisited. Or you might find like, the music, the artistic composition of it is something that's harkening back, which actually gives you a sense again of like rekindling some old connection artistically, musically. So it's kind of there, in the ancient days, they called the archetypes gods and goddesses. And so the Greeks, who were one of the cultures that was very active in this form of worship, they have these huge festivals, and they would see the gods and goddesses everywhere, right? And so you can kind of look at it that way, as like the Venus, the goddess, presenting herself around, presenting herself through a beautiful act, through a beautiful artistic composition, through a beautiful friend, presenting herself. So it's like that kind of shows up too in the ceremony, something to think about. There's an intelligence to this whole thing. I remember one time I myself was going to do a ceremony. I mean, this is a little bit neither here nor there, but it's just kind of something to boost our faith. It's like I was going to do a little ceremony to Venus, a very small thing. Just it was some transit of Venus that I felt was significant, so I was going to do a little ceremony. And I think it was when Venus was going to be right on what's called the ascendant, which is the horizon, rising over the eastern horizon. And I couldn't get to the site on time. I couldn't get there to do the thing on time right when it was rising. And then I got there and I was like, well, I guess I'm late. I'm just going to do it anyways. And I did it anyways. And then afterwards I looked, and the chart that I had pulled up was a chart for a different place. It was for New York. And the actual chart for DC, that when I did it, it was exactly on time. So if I had gotten there and what I thought would have been on time wasn't on time, but when I was grumpy and I was late and I did it, it was actually the right moment. So that's kind of that presentation of the, when we do ceremonies and we do these evocative things, we're in a little bit of a dance with the divine archetype. It's like we're bringing it, but it's also presenting itself to us. Long-winded answer there. Hopefully that was helpful. Questions? More questions here. Geeta?
Comment really. I can't do psychedelics, or even nobody will even take me for holotropic breath work because of my health. But
Okay.
I am doing some fairly intense spiritual work.
Uh-huh.
And Venus is my ascendant is 16 degrees Leo.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's in my 12th house now, and it's really, really exciting.
Yeah, that is very exciting. It's in your first house now. It would be, I think, because it's at 19 degrees of Leo, right? Well, I mean, it depends on your house system, but but
Yeah, no, my house, the rising sign is 16 degrees.
so it's past that, right? It's
Yeah.
past that. It's down to 19 degrees.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So it's any ways that that's been showing up for you?
Well, yeah, it has. There's on the 9th of July, there's going to be a very intense spiritual practice happening in Sydney that well, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's promises extraordinary intense experiences. But yesterday I was taken to, I have a couple of friends. One's an Indian bloke, and he likes to take me around to various temples. Fairly recently, I went to a Durga temple, and honestly, it blew me away. The strength of the energy was just, I was shaking, crying, laughing. I was hopeless. It really was absolutely hopeless. Yesterday, we went to another one, a very big temple. I can't think of the name of the particular god, but he had paid for this very long, an hour-long ceremony for blessings for the three of us. There were three, me and two others, and it was amazing. But they were talking about, and the priest was very definitely he couldn't speak English. He was definitely a newcomer, and very definitely Indian. Very obviously Indian priest. But he was talking about the gods of astrology, but he was talking about malefics, was the old astrology, and definitely, and it really just made me think how we've moved, how we've changed, because this is very definitely the old astrology, and he was insisting that the gods caused things. It was talk about, for me to reevaluate a lot of the stuff. It was a wonderful ceremony. It was lovely, and I did a lot of reevaluating of processes that
Wow.
Anyway. But there's other stuff coming up that I am so, things are very positive for me at the moment on that line in the whole spiritual realm. So the whole 12th. Mind you, I've got a hell of a lot of other stuff working on that as well. So
okay, so it's important to keep in mind that the Venus retrograde isn't the only thing happening. It's like we want to look at our charts and look at all the transits. The Venus retrograde is just one bracket of reevaluating value, reevaluating worth in different areas. There's going to be a lot of other stuff that inflects in there, like what's Pluto doing? What's
Pluto opposition Pluto.
Yeah, okay, wow. And like what's the Jupiter Uranus doing? Like so there's it's a common thing we're experiencing through our own inflection of our own unique landscape that we're walking. So that's exciting, Gita. That's wonderful. And it sounds, and these little communions with the divine, they can show up in these big blasts of spiritual experiences, and they can also show up, like the little things around us, little events, little breaths and tea and this and that. And so it's kind of always with us, sometimes in volcanic form and sometimes in very meek, kind of sweet little form. Thank you, Gita. So any other questions here? Jocelyn, thank you. Alicia. Thank you. Hey.
Oh my goodness, James, I'm so excited about this class. I'm so excited about all the questions that I've heard so far on this call. Alicia, especially your last question, because I had the same question. But the question that I wanted to ask James was regarding the transits, because I know how to check the current transits against my natal chart. And I listen to a lot of astrologers and follow them on social media and stuff. So I know a little bit what's coming, but I haven't at all started to use the transits to plan any events in my life. Okay. And so I'm wondering if we'll go over that in the class.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about the integration circle is that it's really driven by your questions. So, we will talk about transits for probably a large portion of it. So I have kind of, some framework, foundational framework to lay out there, and then we can really entertain any questions. And the great thing is we can look at the charts. We can look at your charts. So we can kind of like look at it by example. Yeah, it's, like looking at like the rhythm of the year ahead, for instance, kind of getting a sense of the rhythm. It's great. You can see like, not only Venus retrogrades, but other planets retrograde too. And you can see, things, there's kind of like pulses, like this 3 months is kind of about this, and then this 3 months is about that. And then this 3 months, this other thing comes back. And yeah, it's just so helpful. I don't know, like it's like that, it's like Google Maps. I'm like, if I was, I don't know, I just like to share it with people because it's so helpful. It's like if I was living in a world where everybody was looking at paper maps and I had Google Maps on my phone, I'd want to share it with people. I think the advantage though of astrology is I feel it doesn't really dumb us down though. It actually awakens the archetypal eye, the ability to perceive these fundamental building blocks of reality, how they shift, how life kind of has its kind of underlying harmony and intelligence, the way it's choreographed. So Jocelyn, we will be looking at that, quite a bit, and we can tailor it to you, to your questions, your life, your year ahead. All
That's
right.
awesome. Thank you. How do I take my hand down? I don't know. Sorry.
No worries. Geeta?
Just a question. What specifically why specifically would you not do a Saturn Neptune transit journey?
If I was starting out with
Starting out,
psychedelics,
yeah.
Even otherwise, I mean, if I was really up for it, if I was a veteran, I was really up for it, I would do it. It's just such a crisis of faith. It's like the Saturn Neptune is a real, I was just talking about this earlier today. It's like, and we actually have one coming up. We got a Saturn Neptune world transit coming up 2024 to 2026, which is really going to be a trying time for, psychedelic field and for Earth, as it always is. It's a crisis of faith because Neptune reflects a necessary aspect of human experience, which is a sense of an enchanting transcendence, a transcendent principle of enchantment in the universe, a transcendent principle that points towards a unifying principle that is enchanting, that actually gives us vision, it gives us hope, it gives us faith. And when Saturn comes in, it tests that. It really tests that. It drops this ink into the Neptunian waters and creates, it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever read Ursula Le Guin, the Wizard of Earthsea, or there's various different kind of, in literature, there's these different examples of the hero comes up against the ultimate illusion that is meant to shatter their sense of faith, and yet they withstand it, and then at the end, and then it falls away, and it's realized that it's an illusion. It's almost like the bad dream, and then you wake up from it and you realize it's a dream. So the Saturn Neptune is the bad part, it's like the part that really is challenging. And folks that are born with that, oftentimes their life is this kind of answer to the question of a crisis of faith. Like I was talking about this example earlier today, M. Somerset Maugham, who is the author. He wrote this book called The Painted Veil. And in The Painted Veil, a lot of it is about this cholera epidemic in China that was happening at that time. And it's about these, there's these nuns. I think they're Catholic, maybe, I don't know what. There's some type of Christian nuns that are there that are serving these people, helping these people, and they're just dying, hundreds, thousands. and they're just serving them and cleaning them and helping them, trying to help them to survive, but it never works. It's cholera and they all die. But it's like this question of like, in the face of tragedy, how to call forth this Neptunian faith, this Neptunian faith that allows us to be present and loving and compassionate, even in the face of something that is so challenging of our faith. So much doubt arising. And actually what happens, the answer, I feel, to the question of the crisis of faith, as Somerset Maugham illustrates it, is the spiritual authority of compassion. So this is kind of like this mother superior character, and she holds this kind of authority of compassion where she's totally solid and knows what she's doing, even though it's the face of tragedy. She doesn't waver, she's just there with compassion. And so that's a long-winded answer, but that's a lot to wrestle with. That's not a light journey. That's a and then when it's Saturn Pluto, that that would be like doing a journey on 9/11. You know what I mean? Like feeling like that type of raucous destruction around us. So that would be also, that's like, it's like, so at least you have the cheat sheet to know if you're up for it. Are you up for that, right? And if you are, then the stronger the tension, the bigger the strength it will impart to you if you're up for it. But for I'm like, people manage so much in their lives, a lot of times getting a journey in there, you want to kind of maximize what you can, and be nice to yourself, and knowing the transits is a way of being compassionate with yourself, avoiding some really hard-hitting things. Personally, my vision of a great societal structure for psychedelic journeys moving forward would be something like a psychedelic pod, where you have I work with a number of professionals, so this is coming from the professional perspective, but if you had a number of professionals, like say 6 or 8 professionals, and they would look at their transits over like a 2 or 3 year period, and then over that period, once every 3 months, maybe quarterly, somebody would do a high dose journey and the others would sit, and then you'd be on a rotating, you kind of, over those years, you'd be on a rotating roster. And that would give you an ability to both journey and sit over a long period of time with consistency and support in a group, also looking at transits. So that would be a very rich structure. Like that's the way I would picture. I mean, coming from the conference, there's a lot of speculation of what does the future of our society look like as integrating psychedelic-assisted therapy. So that's fresh on my mind. What would it look like? Of course, there's talk about centers, things like that. Just for whatever it's worth, that the psychedelic pod is current in my mind. That's something that feels relevant. So yeah.
So was there any contemplation about how you're going to survive, how the psychedelic movement is going to survive the next couple of years when you've got the Saturn?
No, except in my own mind and with maybe a couple astrologers, because at the conference, I only counted a handful of astrologers that I knew.
Oh, okay.
Most of it wasn't, there wasn't any track for astrology. There wasn't any, like we weren't, no astrologers were giving talks. Although Groff Legacy did hold a massive breathwork workshop for 2 days, with it going back to the classic Groff superstardom of 300 people roughly, in a giant breathwork session, which can be amazing. But it wasn't brought in with astrology. Like, Ren Butler, the astrologer, my colleague, he organized a breathwork workshop in Tulum, Mexico, and that's how it was structured. You have the entry is, using astrology, checking out the transits collectively, then talking with the individuals, checking in with them then, and then going into it. And then afterwards also using it as an integration tool, which is great. But it wasn't like that there. It was, I think it was enough for them to manage it, just like logistically. Groff Legacy Training is a new administrative body. Groff is there. He's old. They got to take care of him. They got to organize these giant conference, this huge thing. So not this time, but in the future, I think it will be more present. And the Saturn Neptune, who knows? But I tell people it's like it's not all rainbows and flowers in the psychedelic field coming up mid-century. And not just in the psychedelic field, in the world. It's like just by Saturn entering into Pisces, there's been all this like confusion between reality and illusion and AI and all this stuff. And then when Saturn and Neptune get braided together in a conjunction, it just gets super immediately immediately acute of, like what's real, what's illusion. It's really tripping us up, AI, all this stuff. And we got to navigate it. That's how we grow.
Well, it's legal here in Australia now to use psilocybin and MDMA in a professional setting
Right.
for healing, and yet there's still a lot of opposition. And I'm a bit scared that the TGA, our version of the FDA, will eventually succumb to these naysayers, which is a bit of a worry.
Yeah, it is tough. Hopefully it's naturally, things tend to be kind of like the retrograde movement, 2 step forward, 1 step back, 2 step forward, 1 step back. So hopefully the psychedelics will be 2 step forward, 1 step back, not 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, or 3 steps back. That's my hope. It's a little bit of a catch-22 at the moment, because we're in a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is so bright, so uplifting, so filled with potential. It's hard to even like get ourselves into gear to see the potential challenges ahead, because it's so optimistic. That's actually a kind of like a challenging side, or you could say shadow side, or whatever, challenging side of the Jupiter-Uranus, is it's so bright and so optimistic, it can kind of leapfrog the realities of the challenges. And so that conference, I mean, I enjoyed just about every moment of it, but it did have that quality. It had the quality of like, we're like, we made it through, we made it past the finish line, like it's going to be sailing from here on out, but the astrologers, God love them, they got a bead on the kind of the rhythm of the decade. So in the end, it'll be good. In the end, it'll strengthen it. If we work together, we work with awareness, awareness of ourselves, awareness of these archetypes, presence in the present moment, we will be stronger on the other side. We will gain more strength on the other side of the Saturn Neptune than we will even from the Jupiter Uranus. So it will actually make us stronger, more mature, more of our potential collective wisdom manifest, as opposed to Jupiter Uranus, which is like innovation and excitement, but grounded wisdom. That's like we're harkening back to India, 500 BC or something. You can see the real kind of grounded wisdom traditions from there that have, they're so grounded, they've echoed out over 2,000 years. Same to some extent to the Eleusinian mysteries as well, and the wisdom of ancient Greece and a lot of places. So yeah, you all are the troopers. You're staying with us for the whole webinar. I know there's got to be one more question here, one more rich, meaty one to send us sailing off with. Anybody? Ann, Jesse, Lauren? Sorry to call you out, but yeah, any questions? You can ask personal questions too. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction talk tomorrow night, that is going to be very fun and exciting because the Jupiter-Uranus combination is the archetype of fun and excitement. So you can imagine that that will be suffused through it. So show up for that one as well. All right, well, if that's it, if there's no more questions, we're going to sign off here. Yeah, all right. All right, great. So thanks everyone for being here, and thanks for being on this journey, this exciting journey of self-insight, of exploring outer space, inner space. I honor you all, and more tomorrow night. Okay, lots of love.